Hello, I'm Jonasz Rawiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey ahead. On this episode, we're talking about the one man who has never met a geopolitical conflict in which he would not be able to put himself on the center stage, Donald J. Trump. But here's the twist. Trump 2.0 might actually tighten the screws on Russia. I know, cue the inevitable gasps of surprise. But there is opinions floating around the media that a second Trump presidency might not be a total disaster for Ukraine. This isn't some conspiracy theory I found on Truth Social. It is based on some solid analysis which suggests Trump's instinct to put America first might, in a weird way, work out for Ukraine. So, buckle up, because we're about to take a ride on the MAGA Express, destination unknown, but we might not be making a stop at Disasterville after all. Take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Many more meetings like this one between Trump and Zelensky are expected in the near future. Many hope that they will decide Ukraine's fate, even more than the meetings or calls Trump will have with Vladimir Putin.
And I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have.
It has been almost 3 years since Russian tanks rolled over the borders of Ukraine. Almost 3 years of constant battle in the trenches in a war that hasn't seen its front line significantly shift in months. Almost 3 years of soldiers and uniformed services rushing to the rescue, trying to save who they can in the wake of indiscriminate Russian attacks. Despite initial anxiety and concern, many in Ukraine see Trump's win as a way to put an end to this, to end the almost 3-year-long war which some are starting to believe isn't really going Ukraine's way. After all, there are only so many funerals that a nation can take, so many children that parents have to see buried. This doesn't mean Ukraine wants to give up, far from it. But what many Ukrainians are starting to want is to live.
And now, as always, it's time to explore the issue in greater detail, so let's get going. There are 3 main reasons why, according to some, a Trump presidency could actually benefit Kiev. Let's begin with the first one, Trump's not-so-secret obsession with being the world's toughest leader. He loves calling himself the toughest guy in the room, even if the room is just a McDonald's play area. During his first term, the Donald made a big show of being tough on Russia, as long as it didn't involve directly criticizing Vladimir Putin, apparently. Sanctions were placed, light military aid was approved, and yet his bromance with Putin apparently continued to flourish. In short, lots of contradictory signals there. But here's the thing, Trump's ego might actually push him to be even tougher on Russia the second time around, friendly rhetoric notwithstanding. And why? Because nothing strokes his ego like proving everyone wrong, especially when it involves showing up his critics. Imagine Trump's thought process. Oh, you think I'm soft on Russia? Watch me, pal. He might just double down on sanctions or even push for more lethal aid to Ukraine, all in an attempt to prove that he is the only one who can handle Putin. If going harder on Russia gets him those sweet, sweet headlines, he'll do it. Even if it means doing something good for Ukraine. It's like Trump's version of that accidental hero movie trope, only in this case it involves a lot of spray tan. Okay, so now it's time for reason number 2, which is the president-elect's famous America First policy. Now, normally this kind of isolationist rhetoric would spell doom for allies like Ukraine. But stay with me here, it might actually have the opposite effect here. You see, Trump has a habit of complaining that America is the world's piggy bank and demanding that other countries pull their weight. If he brings that energy back to the White House, it could force some European leaders to finally step up their game. By stepping back, he might unintentionally push Europe to take more responsibility for the conflict in Ukraine. So yes, Trump's hands-off approach could end up being the kick in the pants Europe needs to finally act like the unified bloc it claims to be. Just don't expect the Donald to give anyone credit for it. Finally, reason number 3, Trump's obsession with deal-making. In his mind, he is the world's greatest negotiator. even though fact-checkers might actually think otherwise every now and then. But what if, just if, Trump uses his self-proclaimed deal-making prowess to actually push for a real peace deal between Ukraine and Russia? I know it sounds like a fever dream, but hear me out. Trump is a wild card, and he loves a big, flashy diplomatic win. A peace deal would give him the perfect photo op, standing between Zelensky and Putin, declaring that he was the only one who could end the war. It's the kind of narrative he lives for, like the finale of a reality TV show. Sure, the deal might be shallow, self-serving, and probably involve Trump Tower Kiev, but it could still bring some level of stability. That being said, the idea of territorial concessions will rub Ukrainians the wrong way, and I totally understand that. Crimea is Ukraine, Donbass is Ukraine, and I will not say change my mind, because, it won't happen. To sum up, Donald Trump is not a conventional politician, which is both the worst and occasionally the best thing about him. And who knows, maybe the chaos of a second Trump term could disrupt the stalemate enough to force an unexpected breakthrough. Stranger things have happened, like Trump becoming president in the first place, and now foreign policy is about to become a bit of a gamble. As with any dice roll, the thought of a 6 might be tempting, even at the risk of rolling a 1 instead. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Kira Rudik, Ukrainian MP from the Kolos party. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, Jonas, and thank you so much for having me.
Good to see you again. So, the discussion about Donald Trump and his approach to Ukraine is now beginning in earnest. And what is your take on what you have heard so far regarding all those proposals? I mean, some of them are quite controversial, especially from the Ukrainian standpoint.
Yes, indeed. What we have heard from candidate Donald Trump is not 100% what the President Donald Trump will execute on. And we should be remembering this when we are trying to make any prognosis, right? So we heard that he wants to end the war in just one day. We know that it's a good promise when you're a candidate, but it's much harder to do if you're a president. And
it's a catchy slogan, isn't it?
It is, of course. But we know that there is no simple solution to complicated issues, right? And so right now we see only one way of ending the war in just one day is making Putin take back his forces and give us for justice the war criminals that committed all kinds of the war crimes in Ukraine. But do you think that this is actually going to happen? Because otherwise, we have an army of 1 million people who are fighting, who are ready to fight. We have a society where the majority of families have either someone fighting at the front or have lost someone at the front. And so right now, pressuring this society into some kind of the peace deal will be a very hard topic and very hard goal. Moreover, when Donald Trump is promising to end war so quickly, he needs to remember that Russia's allies, such as China, North Korea, and Iran, they are watching very closely about how the democratic world would react to the aggression, so that they can build their strategies on that. And I think we don't want Iran or China or North Korea to see that the West would appease the dictatorships and would allow to commit war crimes, to start a war of aggression, and then sit at the table of the negotiations.
So it is often said that politicians often make plans, they make decisions. Basically, they have the benefit of a wider view, but they don't really see the situation on the ground, right? Now, you as a Ukrainian lawmaker also have the dubious benefit of having seen this situation up close, because, not only do you live in a country which is at war, I do remember that, a couple of months ago, a missile came crashing down right next to your house, breaking all the windows. So, this is as direct an experience as one can get. What would be your message to lawmakers in Washington who might be looking at this conflict from a distance, but not really, being privy to the visceral reality of it all, which Ukrainians are facing every single day?
Thank you for bringing up this point, Jonas. Well, indeed, here can only support President Zelensky, where he's asking Donald Trump to come to Ukraine before making any decisions. Because it's easy to make the decision or say, well, this is how it should be resolved when you are somewhere far away. And it's very different when you are looking people in the eye, when you are watching the destructions, and you are able to discuss it with people and see what they are going through. Like this night, there was another missile hit on Odessa, where there were at least 7 missile hits throughout the city. People lost their lives, energy infrastructure was destroyed, and we know how it feels, but it's very hard to understand from somewhere beyond. So you need to get to witness it firsthand. And beforehand, we actually have seen how leaders of the democratic countries have made a difference in their opinion before they were in Ukraine, and then when they visited and were able to observe what happened in Bucha, what happened in Irpin, what's happening at the front line, talk to our military, talk to our people, look them in the eye, look at the mothers' eyes who have lost their children, and then make the decision. Because the war is a pain and suffering, and you need to stop it, but you cannot stop it at the expense of the ones who are defending their own lives. And there is one more point to that, Jonas. When we are talking about like some kind of negotiations, we need to be very sure that we are operating the facts. And the facts are, we were in the negotiations with Russia. We had an agreement with Russia in 2014 after they annexed Crimea and our eastern territories. And the world was so happy. Everybody said, well, now the war is over. Now things will be fine. But look where it got us. Because there was not an opportunity, a possibility to anyone to make sure that Russia will keep their part of the bargain. And right now, the risks are that if there would be some freezing of their conflict or a ceasefire or anything, Russia will not stop manufacturing their weapons. Russia would not stop dealing with Iran, North Korea, and China on getting more and more missiles done. They will regroup, they will have a rest, and then they will attack us again. And maybe not only us and other of their neighbors, because they are going through the strategy that they had in Moldova, they had it in Georgia, they had it in Chechnya, and they had it in Syria. And right now we see that they are doing it in Ukraine. So what else needs to happen so the democratic world will see it and start taking it seriously?
So do you think that solutions such as, for example, the much vaunted demilitarized zone, would they make a difference? What impact would they have on the situation on the front line, but also on people living there?
Well, that would mean that we had Ukrainian citizens who were living on Ukrainian territory, who were just people like you and me, right? At some point, Russia had taken their territories, committed all the war crimes that is possible, and we have proofs of that. And then we just give up on them for some political reasons and say, well, now you're citizens of Russia, or now you're supposed to live on the behind the demilitarized territories. How does this work? And how can you then assure any citizens of European Union, of NATO countries, that wouldn't happen to them at some point when it will be politically feasible to do something to people?
So that's a very important point there. I mean, it could also apply to places like Taiwan, where, you know, if China attacks Taiwan, there might not be a line of contact within the next couple of days. They could take over the island. And what would happen then? But let's go back to, you know, the prospect for a negotiated resolution to the conflict, because in our introduction, we did try to put a positive spin on things, like showing what could happen. To the contrary of some of the initial predictions that this could be a very bad situation for Ukraine, the Trump presidency. Do you think that Trump actually has what it takes to put pressure on Russia, not on Ukraine, no pressurizing Ukraine into, surrendering territories and all that, but putting pressure on Russia instead? There are suggestions he could have the opportunity to do that. Would he use that opportunity, you think?
Well, if he could make Putin pull back his troops and for us to restore the sovereignty of our country, that would be probably the most unexpected and the most amazing thing that nobody expects from Donald Trump right now. And of course, we are looking at it at everything that can be done to us as a threat. There is also an opportunity. We remember that Republican Party, and there were at least 7 people who were questioning Joe Biden's plan on standing with us for as long as it takes, which turned out not to be so successful because there was a limit to the weapons and supplies that we received. And recently, President Zelensky said that of the package that voted in Congress this year, by this time, we have only received 10% of what was promised. How can you expect anyone to fight and win with just 10% of what we need, right? So we are hoping that there may be, those some unused cards on the table and in Donald Trump's pockets that he can use against Putin to show that America is a leader of the democratic world and Trump is a strong president who can fight the authoritarian regimes and who can actually win against the authoritarian regimes.
So do you think that Marco Rubio's nomination is a positive signal then, for example?
He's known as hawk. And I think we are lacking hawks in external politics right now. So I hope that he will be working on the point of how to pressure Russia than rather on how to pressure Ukraine into some kind of the peace deal. But the main question remains the following. Are the United States ready to go into war with Russia? Because the security guarantees that are absolutely necessary for any kind of the peace deal mean that if Russia then break their part of the bargain, then the United States or NATO countries should be ready to go to war with Russia. And that needs to be stated. Otherwise, the security guarantee wouldn't mean anything. And they will be just as Budapest Memorandum, when Ukraine gave up our nuclear arsenal for the promises of the security of our territory. And look how it didn't work for us well. So right now, we would need something much more serious, something that we would be able to believe.
So powerful weapons, perhaps also NATO membership. But unfortunately, from what we know so far, this might not be on the cards for now. And of course, this could be seen as a very controversial choice, but we're going to have to wait and see. Kira Rudik was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
And now we move on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. Ukrainian officials have denied recent reports that the country could develop its own nuclear weapons within months. According to The Times, Kyiv could create a basic nuclear device in a short period of time if US aid were to decrease.
Ukraine has a very developed nuclear energy network. This is a similar case to Japan, which, although vehemently opposes nuclear weapons, is widely believed to have the capacity to build them due to its extensive investments into non-weaponized nuclear energy. Some believe Kyiv could be in a similar spot and could extract plutonium from spent fuel rods from its reactors. In turn, the report says that Ukraine could build a weapon similar to the one used on Nagasaki in 1945. Ukrainian officials have denied such a possibility, saying that Ukraine stands by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Following the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was left with a huge arsenal of nuclear weapons. It gave it up in exchange for security guarantees from the US, UK and Russia in 1994. President Zelensky has also gone on record to say that Ukraine either needs nuclear weapons or NATO membership for protection. He was adamant that his country wants the latter.
All men are equal, though some are more equal than others in the case of Russia. A recent report by The Insider says that Russian elites, along with their friends and families, have been enjoying travel for years on diplomatic passports.
Apparently, if Vladimir Putin's administration asks you to issue a diplomatic passport for a friend of his, you do. That's how it works for the Russian Foreign Ministry. While it isn't against the law in Russia for anyone to have such a passport, it is, or should be, highly irregular to issue such documents to non-diplomats. Alas, Russia is a country infamous for being run by oligarchs whose possessions can be found all over the world. Even those against whom Western sanctions have been issued reportedly still hold them. These passports would give people like the oligarchs and their friends facilitated means of travel. Whereas ordinary foreign visitors to Russia will soon have to submit photos and fingerprints if they want to enter the country. They will then be entered into a database linked with Russia's often criticized biometric system, to which both the police and other authorities have access.
Germany has ordered a seaport to reject a delivery of Russian LNG. This order comes as the European Union is pushing to replace Russian energy imports and crack down on the Russian gas industry.
Ships like this one in Spain may soon be a very rare sight in many other EU countries, like Germany. This is a Russian LNG tanker, other than pipelines, a symbol of the Russian gas industry. The EU seeks to crack down on that industry with hefty sanctions and free itself from dependence on the Russian-sold resource. Germany is arguably the most important of that plan. Berlin has long enjoyed the comfort of cheap Russian gas imports. Since the invasion of Ukraine, it has been slowly trying to wipe its eyes clear of the lethargic sleep granted by Moscow's gas deliveries. Although Berlin does not directly import Russian LNG anymore, Germany's state energy company still has a long-term contract with one of Russia's facilities. For years, Russia has used its powerful gas export industry to spread its influence and even to blackmail other countries. It is then of little surprise that Europe now wants out. Though the question still stands: what could replace it?
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.